It's finally here! Hey guys, welcome back to another J Reviews, and we've finally got another chapter of Berserk. And Berserk fans will know that we've been waiting for this one for quite some time. Throughout the coronavirus, the one thing that we held on to was having a chapter of Berserk in June. Then it got delayed, and now it's finally here, and I'm just so excited. So this chapter, it opens with Guts standing at the cliff of an edge with the Skull Knight who greets him. And this is where we kind of left off in the previous chapter. And they have a very laid back conversation. Guts jokes with the Skull Knight, telling him that his concerns about coming here would be quite dangerous. And he tells the Skull Knight that actually he's here in one piece. Their conversation is interrupted by a wizard named Gedfrin. And what we find here is that he recognizes the Skull Knight and he actually calls him Your Majesty. Now, this is a huge indication regarding the Skull Knight's background, and it's never been explicitly said, but we kind of feel that the Skull Knight is actually the King Geiserik, who was the old king of Midland. And the Skull Knight also recognizes Gedfrin, and he mentions about how he was a spoilt young brat. So the reason why Gedfrin is here is that he wants to take the Skull Knight to Hanar, and he asks if Guts would also like to come along. And Guts asks, who is Hanar? Gedfrin tells him that he's the blacksmith who actually crafted his armor, and not only his armor, the armor that the Skull Knight is also wearing. And thinking about the fact that this armor has special abilities, Guts decides to go with Gedfrin and the Skull Knight to the blacksmith. Next we see Shirake, who is practicing her witchcraft, and in particular she is practicing how to fly with her broom. And she's with all of the other witches who are encouraging her. What we see here is that she's struggling and that she's putting in a lot of effort in. And sometimes if you are too focused on something, you overthink things, and I think this is what's happening with Shirake at the moment. And just as she starts to float, we have Morda jump on the back of the broomstick, and she tells Shirake that actually you'll learn a lot quicker if somebody who knows how to fly flies it with you, and they zoom off. And up in the air, Shirake is not very comfortable at all, so she's got her eyes closed, she's moving from left to right, she's kind of scared. And here, this is where Morda tries to calm Shirake down and explains that she's done astral projection and she's flown in that image. So, this flying on a broomstick isn't any different. Start to see that actually Shirake gets used to flying and becomes a lot more comfortable. And they notice Guts, the Skull Knight, and Gedfrin walking down a small ravine. And Shirake asks Morda, where does that path actually lead to? And Morda explains that this is where the island's outcasts hang out. And so we kind of get a sense of feel that the blacksmith Hanar is maybe somebody who has been shunned by the rest of the witches. So Shirake and Morda decide to follow along. As they fly down the ravine and into a small cave, they encounter some wicker men. And these were wicker men that actually attacked Shirake and the rest of the crew earlier on. And Morda explained that these wicker men were actually created by enemies that were captured in a battle a long time ago. As they dive deeper into the cave, Morda recognizes her master. This is the first time that we see the one who has trained Morda. Morda calls her Granny Vol. And again, it's interesting because she's an outcast, and the way that Morda behaves amongst the other witches could be because of her master. So Shirake introduces herself and mentions that she is the pupil of Flora from the Spirit Wood. And it seems like Granny Vol knows who Flora is, but this conversation is interrupted with Morda asking about Guts. And so Granny Vol points them in the direction that they've gone. And Granny Vol tells them that they've gone to the Stone Forest. And as they whiz off, Granny Vol mentions something about a premonition from the past coming true. As Shirake and Morda are flying through the Stone Forest, we see the Skull Knight's horse and the crevice in between the stones. Leaving their broomstick, Morda and Shirake decide to walk through and enter the cave. As they approach Guts, the Skull Knight, and Gedfrin, we see a glimpse of Hana. And the blacksmith has a very similar look to Guts' previous blacksmith, Godo. And these panels, they do seem to suggest that there might be a link between Hana and Godo. It could possibly be that they are brothers, or maybe from the same lineage. Hana recognizes the Skull Knight, and again mentions the word king. And again, it's another indication into the Skull Knight's background. We're not 100% sure, but they really are alluding to the fact that the Skull Knight could be the King Geyserik. Hana then turns his attention to Guts, and specifically the armor that he is wearing, and mentions that he never thought he'd ever see this armor again. Gedfrin asks Hana, because he forged the armor, is there anything that he could tell Guts about the armor? Anything about its special powers and abilities, the reason and purpose for creating the Berserker armor. And Hana is quite surprised about the fact that this Berserker armor fits Guts so well. And he can see that because Guts has been using it for quite some time, Guts now is the owner of this Berserker armor. Gedfrin then tells him that even though he has been using this armor for some time, it doesn't mean that he's actually mastered it. How powerful is this Berserker armor? Throughout many different battles, we've seen the power of the Berserker armor. We know that Guts loses himself in the armor, but it is extremely powerful. So as he is the blacksmith who forged this armor, Hana knows the ins and outs of this armor, and so he picks up one of his hammers and slams it into part of the armor. And what this does is this awakens the beast within the armor, and Guts can see it growing and consuming him. And this is where the chapter finishes. And it's such a cliffhanger, and it's such a tease. Miura, you love to tease us and you love to make us wait, but what an incredible chapter. It just brings us a step closer into finding a little bit more about the Skull Knight, a little bit more about his past, the relationship between him and other characters, and more importantly, I think what we're going to see in the next few chapters is the history of the Berserker armor, where it's come from, why it was forged, and maybe its brother armor, which the Skull Knight is wearing. And I think that maybe the chapter will close with them traveling back to Granny Vol. Are you guys excited for the next chapter? I know I am. I mean, I can't wait for the next chapter. It's going to be such a long wait again. Well, that's it for this video. If you've enjoyed my reaction to this chapter, please leave a like down below. Any comments about this chapter, leave them down below as well. And don't forget to subscribe for more manga and anime reviews.